Hello, everyone, and welcome to WriterSpeak, a program dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. I am your host, Jeane Slone, and the author of 3 historical fictions. She flew bombers, she built ships, and she was an American spy during World War II. I also distribute books, local books, in local Sonoma County shops. In the studio today, I am very happy to introduce Wendell Williams. He is the author of Greed is Good, So Is Socialism, a Unifying Manifesto. Welcome to WriterSpeak, Wendell.
Thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate you having me.
And let me tell the audience all about Wendell. Wendell Williams has led a distinguished career as an entrepreneur and management consultant to over 300 businesses. He was honored to lead the first delegation of U.S. small business owners to the Soviet Union after Gorbachev opened the door to capitalism. His political experience includes being chosen as a Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress. He has been featured and quoted in magazines including Fortune and Newsweek. He lives in San Francisco Bay Area with his wife, Judith Castle Williams. So, Wendell, let's talk about this amazing 86-page, powerful book. When I first met you, you wanted me to distribute this little package in the different shops in Sonoma County, and I thought, this book is so small. I can't imagine anybody buying it, even though I thought the title was pretty incredible, and it did sell. The other thing that you told me about right away was look at Amazon and see all the 5-star reviews. And I did. And again, I thought, wow, this book is a little package with a big message.
Well, I don't want to put myself in the same category as Thomas Paine, because that would be ridiculous, but Thomas Paine's Common Sense was only 47 pages.
Oh.
And it is credited with starting the American Revolution. What I'm trying to do is start another revolution, not a fighting revolution, but a political revolution.
And I did want to add, I noticed on your website, which will be listed in the credits, that you have a wonderful blog going on. So your website is something everybody should turn to after they read your book, because they're going to keep learning more and more and more.
That's right. That's right. And I hope they do, because every time the news comes out every day or so, there are things that relate to the book that I can use as an example, you know, for what I'm trying to say here. You might be interested in knowing how I came up with the title.
Yes. I did want to talk about the title a little bit, and read what Jesse Ventura said. So the title again is Greed is Good, So Is Socialism, a Unifying Manifesto. Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, says, "This little book has so much common sense in it that it will either be not understood or ignored by the folks on Wall Street and inside the DC Beltway. But every American with any common sense should read it." So how did you get this wonderful quote?
Well, it's a coincidence, but he spends the winter in Mexico, and I spend part of the winters in Mexico, and our houses are about 5 miles apart on the Sea of Cortez.
Oh.
So I've gotten to know him as a neighbor, and he's quite a guy. I mean, we don't have time to talk about that, but he's quite a guy. People either love him or hate him, but he's a lot more intelligent than he appears. So that's getting off the subject here. the way I came up with this title was almost off the cuff. You remember that movie Wall Street back in the 80s where there was a character called Gordon Gekko, and he was constantly telling his employees, greed is good, you know. And what happened was it really turned out to be the truth, and the problems we had in 2007 were the culmination of the greed is good philosophy on Wall Street. But so I thought it'd be fun to put Gordon Gekko in the same room with Karl Marx and see what happens.
Well, that is something. It is quite an opposing title in a way. It's almost like saying dictatorship is good, and dictatorship is so un-American.
Well, it's true that pure laissez-faire capitalism is a polar opposite to pure socialism. But let me just use a trite example to explain what I'm talking about here. If I put a glass of pure lemon juice in front of you and a glass of pure sugar water in front of you, and I say, which would you rather drink? You're going to say neither.
Yeah.
They're one's too bitter, one's too sweet. They're distasteful. But what happens if you mix them just right, you get a delicious, tasty drink, which we call lemonade.
That is a really good analogy.
Thank you.
That makes it easier for someone. I'm not very politically savvy, and that analogy does make it easier for me to understand. So you're really just talking a little and a little,
yeah, right,
and a blend.
Right. I'm not talking about pure socialism like it was practiced in the Soviet Union. So basically the thesis is, let's take the best parts of socialism, because there are some good parts which I'm going to be talking about, and let's take the best parts of capitalism, and then throw away the bad parts of socialism and the bad parts of capitalism, just keep the good of both and mix them, and come up with a new economic system which is different than we've ever seen before. So can I read a little bit here?
Yes,
okay.
This is a good time. I'm glad you explained how you came about with the title of the book.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
I have noticed that people who look at your books in the shop, the yellow catches their eyes.
It does.
The title catches their eyes.
Yep. I've had the same reaction too. I'm just going to read a little bit out of the first chapter. The very first quote I have in here is from Harry Truman. And Harry Truman said, quote, "If you laid all the economists end to end to tell you which way to go, they would look like the spokes of a wheel." I like that quote.
And then it can move along.
Well, no, it's not that it's rolling, it's flat. You know, I mean,
oh, I see.
Truman was saying, hey, I've got 5 economists here. If we lay them, try to get some path to take here, maybe but no, they all go in different directions. They look like that, so you don't go anywhere. Fear of socialism. Most Americans appear to be more afraid of the word socialism than the plague. So let me quickly explain what I mean by socialism. I'm not talking about the old-fashioned socialism tried in the Soviet Union, where the government owned the land and the factories and planned the economy. No, I'm talking about a system of social welfare for the common good that also includes welfare for corporations, farms, and so forth, as well as regulations. Specifically, what I mean and advocate is any governmental expenditure where the return on investment to society as a whole is greater than the cost to society as a whole. For lack of a better name, let's just call it democratic social capitalism. And by the word greed, I mean self-interest. Of course, we all have self-interest, but self-interest over any concern for society or the commonwealth as a whole. When people are asked to define capitalism and socialism, they have trouble defining either one, which makes comparing them with each other difficult. However, recently, there is a great interest among Americans about this subject. Wikipedia reported last year that the 2 most often looked up words in the English language were socialism and capitalism. And why is that? The American people sense that something is not working right anymore in our capitalistic economic system. They are just not sure what it is. Furthermore, we need to stop thinking of capitalism and socialism as two discrete options, like the lemon juice and the sugar, black or white, as if we are forced to choose one over the other, instead of considering a blend of the two, or shades of gray, if you will.
Well, what do you think are the main things we need to do to improve our economy?
Well, that's kind of the bottom line. We need to increase taxes on the rich and decrease taxes on the poor. We need to increase regulations on Wall Street and industry. And we need, more importantly, and what my book talks about, we need to use government to create good jobs through incentives. See, when everybody on Main Street's working and has a good job, you don't have to worry about the economy. It takes care of itself. Everything works out. The problem is we don't have that now. We've got the real unemployment rate in this country is about 10 or 11%. You don't read that in the paper because they're using the number of people who come in and look for a job. Well, the truth is that there's at least 4 or 5% of the people out there that have given up. This recession has been so bad for them, they've given up trying to find a job. They're not even trying anymore. They're living with their parents, or they're, in the basement or whatever. And then there's a whole bunch of other people, like college students, that graduated and they can't even find a decent job. So they're working at Starbucks, so they don't show up as unemployed, but they really are. So, our biggest problem really is getting jobs created, and I'm going to talk about how to do that here in a minute. But let me tell you a little bit about what caused me to write this book, how I came up with the idea.
Yeah, I'm sure our audience would really like to know that.
Yeah, well, as you said, I was a management consultant for 35 or 40 years there, and we had about 3,000 clients all over the West Coast. I only worked with 300 of them, but we had 3,000. And in 1986, when Gorbachev started opening the door to a little capitalism, the State Department asked me if I would take a delegation of small business owners, my clients, over there to meet with their new small businesses and the ministers of finance and economy over there, which I did. But that's not the story. The story is that while being there for 3 weeks, I got to see socialism up close and personal. And I got to see the good parts and the bad parts. The bad part showed up immediately. I checked into my hotel late at night, spent the night. Next morning, went out to the street to get a cab to go somewhere, and walked up to this cab driver, and he was standing there smoking a cigarette. And I said, "Can you take me somewhere?" He said, "Nope." And I looked at the cab, it was empty. I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, because I'm on my break." And I thought, man, holy, what a difference. If that happened in New York City, man, he would have stepped on that cigarette, pivoted, opened that door and said, "Yes, sir, where do you want to go?" And the difference between capitalism and socialism just showed up right there.
Yeah.
And furthermore, they didn't even, it was against the law to tip a waiter or a cab driver, anybody, because it was considered too capitalistic, if you can believe that. So it's really ridiculous to carry socialism that far. However, I noticed on the streets of Leningrad and Moscow that there were no poor people and there were no rich people. I mean, everybody was like lower middle class, but everybody had food, shelter, education, child care, medical care. It was all taken care of, So I had a friend of mine who grew up in the Soviet Union, and he says, "Wendell," he says, "when I came to this country," he said, "it was bitter, it was hard." He says, "I used not to worry about a job, everything was sort of taken care of for me over there." I says, "Yeah." And he said, "You can starve to death in this country." Of course, he's exaggerating, but I can see how it could be a big surprise for him to go from there to our purely capitalistic system, which has gotten more and more capitalistic in the last 30 or 40 years. So anyway, I flew back into New York City to be on a television show, a business channel there, about my somewhat historic trip. And checked into the hotel, I think it was the Waldorf Astoria, and I said, "Well, I'll take a walk around. I haven't seen the town only once in my life." So I walk out the front door and I walk down to the corner, and all of a sudden I see people begging, and I see a guy sleeping on the street, and I turned around and I looked at the entrance to the hotel, and shiny limousines were showing up, and people getting out dressed well and walking into the hotel laughing, and I'm looking at these two scenes, and I'm saying, there's something wrong with this picture. There's something wrong with this picture. I had never thought about it before because I grew up in this country and I'm used to filthy rich and the filthy poor. But it just dawned on me there's something wrong with this picture. We shouldn't have an economy like that. Something's wrong. So I thought about it and thought about it. I was in 86, 87, and I started writing this book just 2 or 3 years ago. But that's sort of what got me thinking about it.
Quite a momentous occasion, really, for you to be going to to Russia then.
Yeah, it was, you know.
They called it Soviet Union.
Oh, of course it did. Until 1991, it was the Soviet Union, and I was there during the height of socialism. You know, I mean, had started to figure out maybe they ought to start putting a little capitalism in there, the same way I'm now saying we need to add a little more of their socialism. They need to add more of our capitalism, but. You know, so it was. I went there basically to help with the rapprochement, which was going on at the time. There were large corporations starting to talk to the government over there, and so I figured, well, it'd be interesting to get small businesses talking to each other too.
So, isn't socialism always associated with a dictatorship?
That is a very good question, and unfortunately, most Americans think it is, and it just is not. I've got a little chart here which I want to use to demonstrate that. Okay, so this is dictatorship and democracy. This is capitalism and socialism. So the governmental system is totally different from the economic system. They're really different. They don't have to be tied together at all. We do that, we're so used to tying in capitalism with democracy that we just can't imagine it could be any other way. And we're so used to tying in dictatorship with socialism that it can't be any other way. But the truth is, it is the other way. We have a dictator in China. When I say dictator, I don't mean one person. It could be a plutocracy, an oligarchy, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if there's no way to elect your representatives, I call it a dictatorship. And this particular dictatorship in China has chosen capitalism. And this democracy government here chose socialism. So there's a lot of socialism in Denmark, a lot of it. It's basically, Denmark has done sort of what I'm recommending in here. So no, it doesn't have to. We don't associate dictatorship with socialism. It doesn't have to be that way at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So tell me about Denmark. Are you saying that?
I was over there.
Yeah.
And college is free, medical care is free. The buses are free, almost everything's free. Now the taxes are very high, but you get all this stuff. And did you know that there's a sociological company, I can't remember the name of it, in Europe, where they went around the world, and they do this every 2 or 3 years, and they just ask people in countries the same basic question: how happy are you on a scale from 0 to 10? Denmark won. Denmark was the happiest country in the world when they did this study a couple of years ago. And they have the most socialism of any democratic country in the world. So people are happy, you know. A lot of this amazes me. Some of the conservatives say, oh, we don't want to end up like Denmark, you know. Well, why not?
The question I always have is, how many races are in Denmark?
Well, quite a few now. A lot of the Arabs have moved there and so forth and so on. So
I always think they're all just one race.
Well, the further north you go, I think the more mono race it is.
Yeah.
But what's the purpose of your question?
Well, it's very hard for all the races to get together.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we say e pluribus unum.
Yeah,
It's got to be that way.
Yeah,
And we're doing
it does.
we're doing a pretty good job of it, because this country could have fallen apart a long time ago with all the different races we have, and I'm amazed how well it stays together, frankly.
So what do you think are the main things we need to improve our economy
Well,
at the present time?
can I read a little bit more then?
Oh, yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Title of this chapter is Chapter 6, is Government as a Job Creator. And I know that a lot of conservatives say the government shouldn't be creating jobs. I totally disagree with them. And the reason they say that is because of the way that we've done it in the past, and that's what I'm about to talk about in this chapter. Whether or not you agree with the particular kind of stimulus the government could use to create jobs, the more important question is how the government should go about it. You may remember the Solyndra case. It was a solar panel manufacturer who declared bankruptcy in 2011. The government had loaned them, federal government, $500 million as part of a program to bolster the solar industry. The government assessment of how well this company would succeed was simply wrong. So they lost the $500 million. Having the government pick businesses to receive subsidies is not the best way. There are two reasons for this. First, it is unfair to the competitors of the chosen business. And secondly, it disturbs the invisible hand of the market. You familiar with that term, invisible hand?
No, did you want to explain that further?
It basically says that if you just let people buy and sell, that there's this invisible hand which will always end up with the best products at the least price. You know, because that's what we have in capitalism, which is it's true, and I agree with that. But if you let it too free, in other words, if you have your capitalism too free, there's no regulations and no rules whatsoever, then the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But getting back to this subject of how to create jobs, which is what we really, really need to do now, I believe the invisible hand of the market works well if regulated. So what the government should have done in the Solyndra case is give the money directly to the consumers, not the manufacturers or the distributors. And this way, the integrity of the capitalistic system is kept intact. Consumers will decide which solar installers are their best for them, and the solar installers will decide which distributors to buy their products from, and the distributors will decide which manufacturers to buy their products from. And so the letting consumers choose is a beautiful example of how capitalism and socialism can be unified to bring about a greater common good. The invisible hand of the capitalistic market is not interfered with, and the socialistic function is simplified. Another benefit of this form of socialism is that it can be tied to the unemployment rate. For example, as the unemployment rate increased, the amount of money going to solar purchases would increase, and vice versa. When the unemployment rate went down to, say, a level of 4%, then all the subsidies to solar buyers would fall to zero. The important point here is that many socialistic welfare programs need not go on forever. They should be used only as a medicine when the economy is sick. Now you could say that all the subsidizing, I don't want to read that. Yeah, I guess that's all of that chapter I wanted to read.
That's a good way to put it, used as a medicine for when you're sick, because when you're well, then you don't get the medicine.
Right, right.
I like that analogy.
Thank you. During my many years of consulting, this is chapter 7, the use of taxation and regulation. During my many years of consulting with businesses, I was always amazed at how quickly owners would pivot from one practice to a new behavior simply because the tax code changed or a new regulation was put into effect. So although there are many ways to change people's economic behavior, I would think that taxing and regulating would be the two principal ones. There are many examples that could fall under these two general categories, but it would take a whole book to talk about them. I just want to mention a few so as to get some ideas percolating. We need to greatly increase the income tax rate for people and companies who are the highest earners. The income tax rate under President Eisenhower was, what do you think?
I don't know, but I know that that is a big problem with our economy at this present time.
Well, under Eisenhower it was 90% for the highest brackets. So, you know, not 90% from the get-go, but as you made more and more money, the bite got bigger and bigger and bigger. So it was 90%. If you were brought in $10 million that year, you'd end up paying $9 million to the IRS, and you'd end up with $1 million in your pocket, you know, which I think we could live on. Maybe in those days better. Anyway, Eisenhower could certainly not be called a socialist. Recently, the Democrats had to fight tooth and nail just to get the highest rate raised from 35% to 39%. And Obama was labeled as a socialist for that. If you call up the Socialist Party of America and ask if Obama is a socialist, they'll laugh at you. So the argument commonly put forth by conservatives that decreasing the income tax rate for small businesses will create jobs is also false. I know it's counterintuitive, but the only thing that will cause a business person to hire more people is if the number of people buying their product or services increase. The financial industry needs a lot more regulation. Lack of regulation got us into the Depression in '29 and then again in 2007. Nobody disagrees with this except the folks on Wall Street. If we increased the taxes on fossil fuel companies and regulated the emissions of carbon into the atmosphere, make them pay for dumping their gaseous garbage in our backyard, and then took the same amount of money and used it to subsidize renewable energy in the manner in which I will discuss in the next chapter, then everyone would have jobs. We'd clean up the environment, and we'd reduce the need for war in the Middle East to control oil and gas. Incidentally, a large foreign-owned oil company that had the largest spill in the Gulf of Mexico is running an ad now that says, quote, "Creating jobs is the key part of our commitment to America." What a bunch of baloney. How stupid do they think we are? No corporation ever tries to create jobs. They try to get rid of jobs. You know, I mean, if you create jobs, it's only by accident because you see the need for it. You know, your business is picked up, so you need to hire more people. But you don't hire more people unless you have the need. So no company goes around trying to create jobs. They go around trying to make a profit.
Since we just have a little bit of time left, what is your opinion about how we can stop relying on fossil fuels?
Well, the only solution really is to go into a massive renewable energy program. And that's what I'm really talking about here is one of the major solutions. See, corporations only think 90 days ahead, you know, 6 months ahead. They're just constantly looking for profit. Mm-hmm. Somebody needs to be above that with some vision and see, where are we going? Are we driving off the cliff, you know? And if you just go up higher a little and you just look at it, you can see clearly that we've got to go into a massive renewable energy program to make ourselves independent of Arab oil, clean up the environment, create jobs in this country instead of Saudi Arabia. It's a no-brainer. Yeah. But nobody is looking at that. The government should be doing that. Well, of course, Obama thinks about that, and so do some of the Democrats. But the Republicans don't. They think that, you know, we should stick with oil and gas. And, Lyndon Johnson once said, he says, the Democrats are looking through the windshield at the horizon, and the Republicans are looking through the rear view mirror. So that's the solution. It's the only solution, you know. We've got to create energy through clean ways, green ways, as they now say. And why wait around? Why not just do it now?
Well, it's really just like raising children. Mm-hmm. If you raise your children and don't think about the future, right, then how can they become productive adults?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're just thinking about your children for 90 days,
yeah,
it's
a good analogy.
Yeah.
It's a good analogy. And just I'm thinking of a secretary of a client of mine. She's 25, very nice woman, beautiful, educated, has a bachelor's degree, and I said, "Are you going to get married?" She says, we can't afford to get married." I thought to myself, wow, we're so in such a bad situation economically. The young people are working at Starbucks, they can't afford to get married. And the people on Wall Street are oblivious to it. They say, well, the stock market's going up, the official unemployment rate's down.
I just always think of the saying over and over, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Well, capitalism can be controlled and regulated and taxed, or it can be all the opposite end, it's uncontrolled and unregulated. Now, the more you move in this direction, the more the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that is what has happened in the last 30 years since Reagan, you know. So you can see that if you tax the rich, take some of that money and give it to the poor, start regulating Wall Street and regulating the industries that are polluting, all of a sudden you bring it back to the kind of capitalism I grew up with in the 50s and 60s. We have laissez-faire capitalism. We need to get back to just plain old capitalism. And the way to do that is through the things I'm talking about, which are really called socialism. Nobody likes to use the word, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But it's not pure socialism, like pure sugar water. It's a little bit of sugar to mix in with the bitterness of capitalism.
So tell me, are you going to be making your little book bigger?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've got, you know, the reason it's so small is when I got to this point, I said, wait a minute, I've said everything I want to say. Why gum it up, you know? I mean, and I was thinking about Thomas Paine's Common Sense being 47 pages, and I was thinking, this is common sense.
I've heard that before,
you know,
too.
And why, you know, college professors have to publish or perish, you know, they lose their job. And they have to keep stuff in there to make the book thick, so that, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not into that. I just want to get my points across. But since I wrote the book, I keep thinking of better ideas, way to explain it, more examples I can put into it. So I've got a stack of about this much paper that I'd like to eventually augment the book.
I don't think it's going to be that hard for you, because looking at your website, it is to make that great part 1 into a part 1 and part 2. The part 2's all on your website, and I really encourage everybody to look at your website, and you'll read further on this subject.
Well, you know, the easiest part was writing the book. I had no writer's block. I mean, it just, you know, I've been thinking about it since 1986.
You were ready.
I was ready. It just came right out, you know. And fortunately, my wife's got a master's degree in English, and she could edit it.
Yeah.
Which saved us some money.
In-home editing.
Yeah, saved us some money. But the problem I have now is just getting it out where people can see it, you know. There's so many, I don't know how many million books are published every year in the United States, and unless you're a famous person or connected with some famous person, people won't pay any attention to it. So that's why I'm here. I mean, I'm trying to get the word out. I really think this is the book that everybody who wants to vote for Bernie Sanders ought to read, because Bernie Sanders, this is off the subject, but Bernie Sanders' big problem is that people still think like you do, that, you know, dictatorship and socialism, and that's what it's going to be. But if you read this book, you can see.
Got a wonderful quote on the front. I think that really helps in the marketing of it.
Jesse Ventura helps. There are a lot of people, you know, that don't like him, but at least he's a famous person.
Right, right.
And I like him personally.
People are going to pay attention to that. Where can our audience buy your book?
Well, the only local store is the Reader's Books in Sonoma, downtown Sonoma, but it's available on Amazon.com.
Yeah, yeah. Please, I encourage the audience to go to Amazon and see all the 5-star reviews.
I'm pleasantly surprised at that. You know, there's one review that I wish I'd brought it with me to read, but basically it's a guy in Boston. He said, these are the times that try men's souls, just like they were in 1776. When Thomas Paine wrote this little 47 book called Common Sense, that could have been applied to Wendell's book. So much common sense in it. And that's what Jesse Ventura said, you know?
I've used my reviews from Amazon, and it is very interesting to get other people's opinions.
Yeah.
The book is always at Gaia's Garden in Santa Rosa for those of you who are local.
My book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot that.
The greed is good.
Yeah.
Well, I knew
Your
I
book
could
as well,
say it.
yeah, right.
I wanted to thank you for sharing your book with us and joining us on WriterSpeak.
It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure. I really appreciate it.
And again, I want to encourage the audience to please visit Wendell's website, and it will be listed on the credits.
Okay.
So it will be easy to see and read. And please answer his blogs, and love to see everybody else put their reviews on Amazon as well.
Yeah, I appreciate when people comment about the book and put it on Amazon, because the more the people that do that, the more people read it, and the more they comment and get some conversation going, you know?
There's updated, fascinating further reading on the website. WriterSpeak is produced at the Seed Media Lab in Santa Rosa. I would like to thank our sponsor, the Sonoma County Gazette, and please join us next time for an interview with another talented author.